At the end of this video presentation, you are expected to, number 1, explain the conceptual framework of a study. Number 2, identify the independent, dependent, and intervening variables of a study given the research working titles. And number 3, construct a conceptual framework of a study given the working title. Listen very carefully, students, in this particular video lesson, because this is the start of a major task that you are going to do in writing a formal research paper, because research starts with a problem and ends with a problem, and this is now the start of a research, because you are going to conceptualize a problem that will resolve a particular issue in our community. Specifically, we are now on the new normal setup of our classroom environment. That is why you are encouraged to listen very carefully, because at the end of this video presentation, you are going to make your conceptual framework where your research variables as well as the indicators of the research variables are found in your conceptual framework. And what do you mean by conceptual framework? We are going to have the in-depth understanding of what is the meaning of conceptual framework. Conceptual framework is a structure. So when we say structure, it is a connection or it is an association between or among the elements or parts of a something which is complex in nature. Because when we say research, it is a complex activity. That is why from this complex activity, we are going to have the variables as well as the indicators, and these variables and indicators are being illustrated through conceptual framework, because this will be the summary of the indicators together with the variables that will give us a plan, that will give us the idea how are we going to conduct our particular research. And this structure illustrates the variables at what I have said just a while ago, together with their indicators. And what do you mean by indicators? Indicators are the observable or measurable entities. So when we say entities, these are ideas or things with distinct and independent existence in this particular modern community. So when we say indicators, these are the types, these are the kinds, or these are anything under the variables that we are going to have in our research. And these indicators are to be studied. Take note, indicators are under the umbrella of the variables, because when we say variable, it is a particular thing that is of our interest of the study. For example, we have the leadership. This is our variable, and the indicators of leadership are compassion, we have the commitment, we have the social competence, we have the motivation, we have the encouragement, and we have also the performance. And these are the indicators of the one variable. That is why if you are going to conceptualize your research problem, in this particular problem, you are going to think of the variables that you are going to study. And this variable is of your interest. And out of this variable, you are going to look for the indicators. And these indicators, as well as the variables, can be found from reading related literature. That is why review of related literature is the start of everything in the research. Although research starts with a problem, and this problem can be found through reading and reading. And where are we going to look for our sources if we are going to read? From the printed materials, from the available printed materials. But due to the occurrence of this COVID-19 pandemic, it is very difficult to go to the library, to the physical library, but the solution of this particular problem is the online sources of data that we can have. If you have the connection in the internet, there are so many potential research problems that you can locate from the internet. Because when we say quantitative research, you are just going to replicate. So when we say replicate, you are going to study again a particular study in order to validate or to test the effectiveness, or you are going to disprove or prove the existence of this particular idea or phenomenon or hypothesis. And another term for conceptual framework is a research paradigm. And what do you mean by research paradigm? This is the bird's eye view. This is the world view within which researchers are going to work. That is why when we say conceptual framework, it is where our research variables as well as indicators are found. Because as you see the conceptual framework, you can automatically determine what particular objective of the study is all about and what particular research design is being indicated in this particular conceptual framework, and we can also identify what are the specific research objectives that we have because of our conceptual framework. This research paradigm can best explain and represent how the variables might relate to each other, because variables can have relationship with each other, and if these variables have the relationship with each other, we are talking about the correlational research. But if these variables are just only all independent variables, the research that we are conceptualizing is not correlational research, and this research is descriptive research. This is the kind of the research that is very friendly to you as senior high school students, is to have the so-called descriptive research. And this research paradigm is linked with the concepts. Yes, we have the concepts. All of the concepts that you have gathered from review of related literature, all of the empirical researches. When we say empirical researches, these are the researches which are personally conducted by the researchers. And important theories. You can also have the important theories. We have the laws, we have the orders, we have the memoranda that will talk about that particular variable, and you can include all of them in your conceptual framework. But conceptual framework is just only a deductive summary of what is being talked about in your particular problem. And these concepts, empirical researches, and important theories are used in promoting and systemizing the knowledge espoused by the researcher. Take note, you cannot look for your problem if you do not want to read. Because from reading, you can gain several knowledge. You can gain several concepts. You can gain several empirical research findings. You can gain many important theories that are all potential for your research problem. Okay. Now, conceptual framework should be constructed before beginning to devise a research instrument needed in collecting data. As what I have said, research begins with a problem, and where this problem is found, from our conceptual framework. That is why this is the beginning of the formal writing of a research proposal. And this conceptual framework is the basis of your statement of the problem. What do you mean by statement of the problem? These are your research objectives. And this is also your research problem because your major objective is your research problem. And in constructing your research instrument, the basis is your research objectives. And the basis of your research objectives are from the ideas, from the concepts, from the theories that you have summarized in your conceptual framework. And it is being illustrated through diagram, and this diagram is called research paradigm. Because as what I have said just a while ago, it is a structure. When we say structure, it could be a verbal description, it could be a textual description, it could be a visual representation of what is talking about the research problem that you want to investigate. Because conceptual framework has two parts. We have the textual description. In this particular part, you are going to explain the concepts, the empirical research findings, the important theories that you have collected from several sources. We have the primary sources, we have the secondary sources, and we have the tertiary sources. And what are these primary sources of information? You are going to conduct interview. You are going to witness a certain speaking engagement. You are going to conduct focus group discussion. You as a researcher are the ones collecting your idea, the information or the data, because first-hand sources of data are called primary sources. And we have also the secondary sources of data. And what are these secondary sources of data? If you are a researcher and you get the pictures or the videos being taken by other researchers, and that sources of data that you are using, in which you are not the ones who took that particular pictures, who took this particular notepad which contains several bright ideas coming from the speakers, are considered to be secondary sources because you are not the ones who took that particular data. And if these data are being synthesized or summarized already in the thesis or dissertations, already in the magazines, and these are considered to be tertiary data already. And these are the sources that you are going to consider in having your review of related literature, because from review of related literature, you can have your conceptual framework. And in your conceptual framework, that where your problem is found. And this particular conceptual framework is giving you an idea what will be the major research objective that you have, as well as the specific objectives that you have, that will determine what specific statistical tools you are going to employ. Now, this is the most difficult part of a research process, is identifying the research problem. Yes, this is the most difficult. That is why after this video lesson, your major task already begins, because you are going to use all the sources of data that you can access in order to replicate a certain problem or a study, because quantitative research is replicating a certain study of the previous researcher because you want to validate the findings of the previous researchers because quantitative research findings are not permanent. These are dynamic, meaning the findings of other researchers might not be the same with the findings of the future researchers. That is why you are going to replicate because you are going to refresh the ideas. You are going to make the obsolete ideas relatable to the modern society. And constructing conceptual framework is the start of the research process because as what I have said, your research problem is found in your conceptual framework. And in your conceptual framework, you have the variables. And these variables are either independent variables, dependent variables, as well as the intervening variables. And from these research variables, you have also the indicators. And what are these indicators? These indicators are the observable. When I say observable, this can be observed by your naked eyes. Measurable. They can be measured using statistical parameters. You can measure these indicators using the Likert scale, for example. Because if these indicators cannot be measured, cannot be observed, you cannot consider this as indicators of the research variable. That is why the following activities will guide you to look for a research problem which will eventually become potential title of your research. So, listen very carefully because I am going to give you a certain activity in which you can use this basis to conceptualize your research. This is the activity. Direction. Think of a research variable. Take note, anything under the heat of the sun, as long as you can observe it using your naked eyes, you can see, you can touch. Although even though you cannot touch, but you can measure it, that is a potential research variable. Look for its indicators. How are you going to look for the indicators? You are going to use any sources of data. Could be printed materials. There are also the online sources. And when you say indicators, the types, the kinds, and these are the observable or measurable events, entities. And these entities are ideas or concepts which are related to the particular problem. And you can look for your research variable and its indicators from any sources. It could be primary sources. You can interview someone. Okay, you can conduct a focus group discussion if you want to know what are the indicators of this particular idea that you have. Because your idea that you want to investigate could be a variable. And if you cannot do the interview or the focus group discussion, you can do the online sources. You are going to use the internet for your researches. Okay, if you cannot go to the physical library, what you need to do is to construct research objectives out of this research variable. How are you going to construct research objectives? Because research objectives are your research problems already. Okay, out of this research variable. Now, for instance, letter A. Your variable is solid waste management. And this is your variable. Okay, solid waste management can be observed. And this can also be measured. So what are those things which are under the umbrella of the solid waste management? And all of these things are so-called indicators. But take note, your indicators, if you're going to have your indicators, you have your basis. Where did you get these indicators? Because you cannot make your own indicators without any references. Because you are not conducting a qualitative research. Because if you are conducting quantitative research, you have the sources. Because in qualitative research, you are going to generate hypothesis. Okay, you are going to develop hypothesis. While in quantitative research, hypothesis is already generated by other researchers. What you need to do is to validate or to conduct again this particular idea in order to give more findings related to this particular variable. And that is what you're going to do in conceptualizing your research problem. And after conceptualizing all of these research problems, all of these indicators, you are going to make a structure in which this structure will illustrate the connections of the variables that you have as well as the indicators. Now, okay, what are the indicators of the solid waste management? It could be collection, yes. Because if you are going to have the solid waste management, you need to collect. Because if you do not collect the solid waste management, proper collection of the solid waste management, that is a danger to our health. So that is why collection is something to do with solid waste management. That is why one of the indicators is collection. Because we are going to determine the level of the collection strategies being applied by our school or by our municipality in order to maintain the cleanliness in our community. Number 2, transport. You are going to transport because if you just only collect the solid waste management without transporting it to the proper places, proper disposal area, so that will also become a danger to our health. So therefore, transport can be indicator of the solid waste management. Number 2, treatment. How are you going to treat the solid waste management? Number 4, disposal. Yes, there are so many indicators. And take note, these indicators are having the basis. Where did you get? What study that gives this indicator? Okay, we have the monitoring and evaluation. Because you have to monitor the collection, the transport, the treatment, and disposal of the solid waste management. And we need to evaluate. And conducting a research is one of the evaluation strategies that we're going to have in order to improve the implementation of the collection or the proper solid waste management. Now, how are we going to make a research questions about this particular variable and its indicators? Now, in your assignment, research objectives are not part of your assignment because what you need to do is to make a textual description of your conceptual framework. After that, you have your research paradigm, or this is the visual representation, and I will be giving you many examples of conceptual framework by and by. And what activity that I am going to give to you right now is how you are going to conceptualize your research problem. Now, for that particular variable and its indicators, you can have the general objective of your study. This study generally aims to assess the implementation of solid waste management or SWM of the municipality of Esperanza, Sultan Kudarat. And this is your major research objective. And these are your specific objectives. And your major research objective will determine what particular research design you are going to employ. But we will not state the research design here because we will be having a separate discussion of the research design because research design is in the chapter 3, as well as the statistical tools can be determined using our specific research objectives. So, this is just only an activity for you to conceptualize your research title, temporary title, working title, research problem, research topic are all talking about the same thing. Now, specifically, this study seeks answers to the following. What is the level of the implementation of the solid waste management in terms of, take note of of the indicators, because your indicators will be found in your statement of the problem. For example, collection. What is the level of the collection? Okay. Transport. What is the level of the implementation of the solid waste management in terms of transport, treatment, disposal, monitoring, and evaluation? And we can measure this through survey questionnaire. Okay. Number 2. What is the level of residents' knowledge, attitudes, practices, and awareness on solid waste management? Okay, although the indicators here, which are knowledge, attitudes, practices, and awareness, are not found from the indicators that you have enumerated just a while ago, and that is normal, because this is additional flavor. This is the so-called additional flavor, because you are going to determine the level of residents' knowledge, attitudes, practices, and awareness on solid waste management. And number 3, take note, if you're going to have your research objectives, aside from the major research objective, you have at least 3 specific research objectives. 2 specific research objectives are not acceptable. You are going to have 3 or 3 to 5. Okay. What are the problems encountered in the implementation of solid waste management? So you are going to think of the questions which can be answered through survey questionnaire to make your research objectives a minimum of 3. Research objectives are research questions. Statement of the problem. Now, what do you think is the working title of this particular idea that you have taken, that you have conceptualized? What do you think? This is it. Residents' knowledge, attitudes, practices, and awareness on solid waste management in the municipality of Esperanza, Sultan Kudarat. And this is very nice research. Okay. Number 2. I want to have a particular study about COVID-19 pandemic. What are the things that I want to investigate from COVID-19 pandemic? And these are the indicators. There are so many things that you want to investigate from COVID-19 pandemic. Take note, you are going to give your indicators which are observable or measurable. Because if you cannot observe, if you cannot measure, you cannot distribute survey questionnaire, because survey questionnaire is the main instrument that you are going to have in quantitative research. Okay, what are the indicators of COVID-19 pandemic? When I say indicators, these are related entities, related ideas or concepts which are under the umbrella of the research variable that you have. Okay. These are the indicators. Psychological. And what are these psychological effects? We have the anxiety. I myself experience anxiety sometimes. Okay. The number 2, depression. There are people who are depressed because of overexposure to patients who are infected with COVID-19. We have the nurses, we have the major frontliners, we have the nurses, the doctors, medical specialists. Some of them experience the so-called depression. Even though the ordinary citizens like us also experience depression if you hear the word COVID-19 pandemic, because this is the first time that we experience this particular phenomenon. And this phenomenon is very potential for your research problem. Yes. Okay, number 3, what do you think? What do you think is interesting if we are talking about COVID-19? Because that will be very potential for one of your indicators in COVID-19. What do you think? Stress. Take note, stress is lower degree compared to anxiety. Anxiety, then stress, then you have the depression. Because depression is very severe mental or emotional problem, no? So these are the psychological effects of COVID-19 pandemic. You have the anxiety, you have the depression, and of course, stress. Why? For example, we, the teachers, sometimes we are stressed in making video lessons just for the students to really learn. And that is normal. And this COVID-19 gives us the anxiety, depression, and stress. And we can measure all of these things using survey question. Although we cannot see anxiety, depression, and stress, but we can observe that a person is having the anxiety. We can observe that a person is having the depression. We also observe that a person is having the stress. Therefore, these are measurable. And of course, these are observable. And those are variables, and their indicators are measurable and observable. Okay. Aside from the psychological effect of COVID-19 pandemic, what do you think is other effect of COVID-19? We have the social effect. And what are the indicators of the social effect? Take note, psychological and social are indicators of the COVID-19 pandemic. Anxiety, depression, stress are indicators of psychological, meaning anxiety is a sub-indicator of the COVID-19 because we are going to classify these indicators according to categories. Okay, what are the social effects of COVID-19? So when we say social, it is something to do with interpersonal relationship. It is not only one individual is being affected by this COVID-19, but the whole, as a whole. Unlike with psychological, there are people who are not affected with the COVID-19 psychologically. They don't have the stress because they are the strong people. Okay. But social, everybody is being affected. And what are these indicators of the social effects of COVID-19? We have the economic uncertainty. Unless the vaccine for the COVID-19 will be discovered, we are not certain of what will be happening to our Philippine economy. Yes, because many of the establishments are closed. Specifically, the malls, no? Limited number of people are allowed to go to the malls. We cannot watch movies right now. We cannot go to the gym right now. We cannot have our group activities because of the social distancing so that we can avoid the spread of the COVID-19. And these are the social effects of COVID-19. Not only one person is being affected, but the whole community. And that is why social. Number 2 is leisure activities. And these leisure activities are the group games. We have watching movies in the malls. We cannot go in picnic this time, go to the beach, because a group of people is being discouraged. And this is one of the social effects of COVID-19. Number 3, we have the social well-being. You have your family relationship, of course, and that is also part of social well-being. How are you going to go? You cannot go to the places that you want. You cannot go to field trips. You cannot go to other places. You cannot visit your friends in far distant places because of the border lockdown. And these are the social effects of COVID-19. And all of this can be measured. Although anxiety and depression as well as the stress cannot be observed, cannot be seen by our naked eyes, but they are all observed and we can measure all of these situations. That is why indicators are observable and measurable entities, ideas, or concepts related to our variables. Okay, now what do you think is the potential title of this particular research problem? Okay, by the way, before that, we are going to have first the research objectives. The statement of the problem is composed of two. We have the general objective and we have the specific objective. And we have the general objective here. The general purpose of this study is to determine the level of psychological and social effect of COVID-19 pandemic. Take note of the two major variables or the indicators of the variable COVID-19, psychological and social effect among the millennials of Esperanza National High School. Take note, you must be very specific with your respondents. This study is just only considering the millennials. And who are these millennials? You are the students, are millennials. These people who are exposed with modern technologies. Okay, students are millennials because you are very exposed with social networking sites and you are very potential respondents of this particular study. Teachers are also millennials. Those teachers who are invaded also by this modern technology. You are going to define millennials in your definition of terms. Who are these millennials? Okay. Then, specifically, and these are your specific research objectives. Take note in your major research objective is just only the paraphrasing of your research variables. No, the major research variables of your study together with the indicators. And in your specific objectives, the indicators will be stated. No, specifically, this study will be carried out to find answers to the following. Number 1, to what extent it is the effect of COVID-19 pandemic to the following psychological emotions of the millennials? Take note, anxiety. Anxiety is already we have already enumerated just a while ago. Number 2, depression. And number 3 is stress. If you're going to make your statement of the problem later on in our next activity, you are going to follow this particular format. Number 2, to what extent is the effect of COVID-19 pandemic? So when we say extent, level, degree, to what degree is the effect? To what level is the effect of COVID-19 to the social stability of the millennials relative to, number 1, economic uncertainty, number 2, leisure activities, and number 3, social well-being. In your definition of terms, you are going to define all of these research variables as well as the indicators. How do you use these words in your study will be the basis for your definition. That is why operational definition of terms. Now, what do you think is the third statement of the problem to make it 3, which is the minimum? What preventive measures do the millennials do to avoid the adverse effect of the lockdown caused by COVID-19 pandemic? What are those measures do the millennials do in order to not feel adversely the effect of the lockdown caused by the COVID-19 pandemic? And you can determine that through asking questions to the respondents, through giving survey questionnaires, through interview using phone calls. So, as long as you can measure, you can observe, you can get data out of these questions, and these are potential research objectives of your study. That is why from this particular lesson, you are going to begin conceptualizing your research problem, because research is a complex activity, and it starts from a problem. And this activity, this video lesson, gives you an idea how you are going to construct your conceptual framework, because conceptual framework is where your research problem is found, together with the variables as well as the indicators, because these variables and indicators are being stated in your statement of the problem or research objectives or research problems. Okay, now what do you think is the potential title of this particular problem that you conceptualize? Psychological and social effect of COVID-19 pandemic among the millennials of Esperanza Sultan Kudarat. Take note, you are going to have the scope of your study, because it is impractical to consider all the millennials in the Philippines. Just only consider those living at Esperanza. Then from Esperanza, there are so many barangays. You are going to delimit again what barangays are only included in your study. So that is why in our part of the research paper, we have the scope and delimitation. And that will be very defined in the part of the scope and delimitation. And after giving you all the basic inputs about research, we are going to tackle its part of the research proposal, so that you can make your own. Try to make your own research, students, because research will really help you develop your writing and thinking skills, your higher order thinking skills. Because if you are good in research, you are good in decision making. You are good in writing. No? Okay. Now, another research problem or variable is communication. Now, what do you think are the indicators of communication? So when you say indicators, these are the kinds, these are the types, these are the observable and measurable entities, ideas or concepts which are distinct, which are having distinct existence in this particular community. So communication, what do you think are the indicators? We have here the verbal communication. Yes. Can you measure the verbal communication of an individual? Yes, we can measure it. Yes. Another one, non-verbal communication. And we have the written communication. Take note. We have the verbal communication, non-verbal communication, and we have the written communication. Then we have also the visual communication. These are the types of communication. And how are you going to make your general objective of your study? This study aims to determine the extent of communication skills of students of Esperanza National High School. You are going to determine the level of the communication skills of the students. Okay, how about your specific objectives? Take note, minimum of 3. Number 1. Specifically, this study will answer the following questions. Number 1. Take note, this is all about your research indicators just a while ago. What is the level of the communication skills of students in terms of, what is number 1? We have the verbal communication. Number 2 is non-verbal communication. Number 3 is written communication. And number 4 is visual communication. Now, all of the indicators that you had are already stated. Now, what are other 2 research objectives? What are the other 2 concerns that you want to investigate? Because all of the indicators that you have already utilized in your statement of the problem. So, you are going to think of the 2 questions research questions because from the first video presentation that we had, you are oriented on how you are going to make questions which are inquiries and how are you going to construct questions which are considered to be investigations and the questions which are considered to be research questions. But take note, all the questions that you're going to have will be related to communications, and these questions are answerable through research parameters. So when you say research parameters, there are criteria. There are objective measurement tools. Okay, number 2, what do you think? What are the barriers? Yes. When you say barriers, problems, what are the reasons? Why? What are the difficulties to communication encountered by students in the classroom? So you can ask individuals and they can enumerate. Or you can identify these barriers and you are going to make you are going to determine the level of the each barrier that is being encountered by the students in the classroom. So there are so many barriers. Okay. Then number 3, what are the practices of teachers to improve the communication skills of students? Although these are not indicated in the preliminary conceptualization of your research variable as well as the indicators, but these research questions can be answered through questionnaire, can be answered through interview or focus group discussion. And these are all related to communication. And all of these researches are descriptive researches, and these are the researches which are very friendly to the students. Okay, what do you think is the title of this research problem? Take note, the title that you think is also correct because this title is just only temporary. That is to be made final if you already successfully presented this research to the panel of adjudicators, to the panelists. If they do not have the comment regarding the title, your title is very good. If they do not mention why this kind of title, if they do not have the comment about your title, it means that your title is very good. Did you understand? So, okay, before I'm going to present the title, you are going to guess what is the title of this research. What do you think? Okay, I know that you have already in your mind what is the title. Okay, Communication Skills of Struggling Students of Esperanza National High School. You're going to include the struggling students so that you have a limited number of respondents only. You do not consider those students coming from the STEM curriculum. You are going to study the communication skills of the students who are in the lower sections, who are encountering the language deficiency. Okay, so that is how you're going to conceptualize your research problem. Take note, research problem is composed of the general problem and the specific problems. And the specific problems are the research questions. Okay.